not crossed my lips in many years. And it was quite a gift when we were and figuring it out.
Good morning, everyone. I'm so happy to see all these beautiful faces. I'm Amy Freeman. I think everyone knows me. And it's like we've been thinking about this training for months now, and I'm so excited that we have it available, personalized for our staff so that it can make sense to us and the families that we serve. So I'm thankful to see all of you, and I'm excited about this upcoming work. And I know Marbella had a couple of words to say too before we get started.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Amy. Yes, I cannot say enough on behalf of Dr. Lisa and myself. We want to welcome all of you. Thank you for taking the time of your busy schedules to be this morning with us. I cannot thank enough Ronnie, Tracy, Celia for doing this presentation. We know that this specific curriculum is so needed to our families and detrimental in the transition process that our families and our children go through. So I'm looking forward to today's presentation, and I hope everybody will gain so much information so we can share with our families and the students and professionals that we serve. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you so much.
And I'm so excited that Dee Marks is here too as a parent mentor, but maybe more importantly as a practitioner in the work that she does as a parent mentor, but also as a parent herself and the work with her son. So that's pretty exciting.
Absolutely. Hi, Dee, how are you?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, guys.
So I did want to let you folks know that because many of us as ambassadors and Charting Life Course ambassadors are in dual roles, Ronnie is not able to be with us. They've had a number of folks in their school district not present. And so her managing and supporting her team required her at the last minute last week to let us know that she could not be here. But she is absolutely within every piece of this work. She's worked really hard with Amy and I as we put this all together. I want to introduce, so this could not have been possible without her input. And she really tried to help me keep my eye on the role of the coalition and who you guys are and your history into the pieces and the places that we put together for this space here. I want to briefly introduce Tracy Mans. You'll see her in the corner of your screen with the beautiful OSU mosaic behind her. And Tracy is the person that makes me look really good in this space and look like I know what I'm doing. So you can know that if I am tripped up at all, it's because I didn't listen to her and didn't pay attention to something. And then in the other corner is Linda. And Linda is, again, with the OSU team and a family member herself. All three of us are family members. That's kind of a prerequisite to this work. And Linda's going to support me too. And she's going to be supporting the breakout sessions and that kind of stuff. I can't do this without them. So, and we're pumped about this presentation in particular because Amy really charged us with making it interesting and changing a lot and not a talking head. And so if I look like I'm struggling a little bit with technology to jump from item to item, I am, but it's something I'm going to carry into other presentations because of the input that they shared with us. So again, I thank you all for coming. We're going to get started real quickly. I want to give a brief commercial to the, oh, wait a minute, Amy, go ahead. Oh, no, I thought I saw you talking. Okay. Brief commercial for those who make this possible. This work has been in Ohio since 2016, and it actually was being discussed for many years before that. But all our big players are involved, and Ohio is different because not only did the Ohio State Agency buy into and think this was a great thing to bring and support families in Ohio, but in addition to that, they put funding behind it, which is unusual. And we hear that a lot when we go into the national group. They're like, oh, but you guys, so there is real buy-in here that this is a way to look and talk and think differently about how we support families in Ohio. So I want to acknowledge that great support that we have. We are part of something called the Family Resource Network of Ohio, and that was created to support families differently. It's important for you guys to know about that and go check out that FRNO website, because we can put anything and everything that you're doing onto that calendar and let folks know it's available, and it's another way for you to get the word out. So please, whenever you've got something that you want families to know about, make sure that gets sent to Tracy and gets put on our FRNO website. We also have the backing and support of DD Council, who was amazing and helped us train. Tracy, you're gonna have to help me because when I thought about this last night, I don't know the number. Train a bulk of Ohio ambassadors. And how many ambassadors do we have now?
We're about 35. They'd helped us train an additional 15.
And I would have to say, I'm going to be pretty sure that that's probably close to a record in one state. So the fact that we've got that many people that can help support this across the state, and they're all over the state. So that's really exciting work with this too. So that's my little commercial for that. I want to stop. Whoops, sorry. I want to roll my screen. Not really, but I did. I want to stop sharing for a second and just talk to you about that national group. So there's only there's 22 states that are doing this work that have embraced it as a way to look and think differently about how we support families. And that work comes out of the National Community of Practice that began this back in 2012 through a gathering called gathering, and out of that gathering came a white paper called the Wing Spread Report. And I'll send a link at some point while you guys are in the breakout room. I'll find the link for that. It's a great document if you have a second to read it. It really just confirms what we know about families and what families need. And for me as a family member, it was very confirming. It's like, yes, this is not rocket scientists. We've been saying this for a while. So that's a great document, and I'll put that in the chat while you guys are in one of your breakout sessions. I want you to know that we are currently in Ohio, now have presented and are in some capacity in most cases in 86 out of 88 counties, which having begun only in 2016 is a real coup for us. But we're also in schools. Not only have we presented and talked to transition specialists and transition coordinators, but we're also now bubbling up district projects and post-secondary programs that are grabbing a hold of it. ODE is now including it in some of their grants. We've got family support projects that are kind of grassroots, but that are being supported by the schools. So it is something that is becoming known in some of our counties, some of our larger counties, to different schools. In addition to that, we're in self-advocacy spaces. So the Project STIR has redone their training. Barb Safaris was instrumental in working with Dana Charlton to put Charting Life Course as a framework within the Project STIR training. The UC Transition Access Program has developed their program, not only utilizing it with the students, but they've created trajectories and used the framework to talk about the program itself. What does the good life for the end of freshman year look like? What do we want our sophomores to be doing? What do they need to be doing by graduation? And they've built their program through the use of these tools and talked about it in that way. And then lastly, that idea of systems change. And we've seen the Ohio Department do the same thing, building it into grants where it makes sense for them to have a lens for how they support families and how they think about and how they empower the family voice, in addition to things like Project Trees, and they're looking for places to integrate it. The parent-to-parent network that's being developed at our UCED is beginning to integrate Charting the Life Course in as a key piece to supporting that program. And then early intervention groups, Hamilton County Early Intervention is now making sure that that our question and answers for early childhood and school age are being handed to families as they exit, whether they go right back into school age services or if they exit and they're going into school. And then we know there's grumblings, and I don't know if you guys are hearing them, but there's grumblings of this idea that it is included in the new One ISP that will be rolling out eventually. We keep moving that deadline a little bit, but that's okay. But we will have a conversation around those domains and developing the whole life for the individual with a disability. And that's going to really be integrated into that new One ISP process as an SSA takes a family through that. You're going to see a nod to those pieces. So we really are trying to embrace this everywhere we can, and we're looking for new spaces to do it. And I'm excited as you guys go through this conversation today about where it is that you might see it fitting. And that's the beauty of this. There's never an expectation for you guys to change everything, drop what you're doing, redesign. It really is, where does this make sense? Where are the nooks and crannies where it can hold up something you're already doing and enhance it? Or where are the places where you felt kind of stuck that you're like, you know what, maybe this piece of this really could make a difference, really could change how we're doing it, and we won't feel so stuck. So we're really going to want you to be listening and pointing those out to each other as we go. If you have this idea of, wow, wouldn't this be cool here? Throw it into the chat box. Make sure that folks begin that conversation. If you have a question, especially in this space, because we've tried so hard to have the lens of what you guys do, but what you do is so vast and so broad. I really want you to put in there, yeah, this doesn't fit, I'm not sure. I want you to tell me that. I don't want you to be afraid to ask those kinds of questions. So please utilize that chat space. And Tracy and Linda are going to knock me in the head because I get on a roll and they're going to say, Celia, you need to go back to the chat for a second. So they're going to help me with that. So real quick, we're going to do a real quick poll because it's going to be helpful for me. Tracy's going to throw that up there to ask you, what's your experience? Have you, we are doing, this one's race and ethnicity, Tracy. Is that the one we, oh no, it's just called that. It's just mistitled. So ignore the title, but go ahead and answer the poll. What is it as far as your familiarity? So if you guys can real quick answer that, that will be helpful. 100%. Oh, there we go. Good.
My apologies, everybody. I took the race and ethnicity question out and forgot to retitle it. So I apologize.
That's okay. All right. So I can't, teeny tiny screen. Are we at 100%, Trace? Mostly, but so they've heard of it, they've not used it in any of the tools in your work. So hopefully the way we've designed this for the 2 sessions, you will touch 3 tools. You will touch the trajectory, the integrated service star, and the one-page profile by the time we're done. Today, we are going to focus on the trajectory. In talking to Ronnie, she thought that was the first and foremost piece to talk about, and we wanted to give it the attention we could. So I'm going to share the results real quick so that you guys have a sense of that. And then I'm going to pop out of there and jump back to my screen. Okay. Technology. Okay. So why? This is kind of our why. We talk a lot in this group about knowing our why. And so why are we here? This work began out of a conversation of saying, what does it really truly mean to support families? And what is it that we've done so far, looking at ourselves historically of what we've done well, but trying to say, what do families really need? And that bubbled out of a conversation directly with families. And I cannot think in Ohio about families without thinking about this organization and what they do for families. So I think this being in this space right now is super important. And I'm excited about what we might learn moving forward. But when you look at this, these 3 images on your slide are, look to that far left. I'm sorry. Oh, you're not. I'm sorry. Are we, Amy, I saw you shaking your head. Is there a problem?
I don't have slides up. Maybe it's just me.
Are you guys seeing the 3 circles?
I see the slide.
It's
Okay.
me.
All right. So when you look at that slide on the far left, it really is simply showing all of us, how we exist in the world. We are people within a family, within a community. And that family can be chosen family. That family can be family that we don't see at all. But they are kind of our roots. We know sociology tells us that as families, we bring in our DNA are those people behind us, right? So that's how we kind of all exist. But when you look at the one in the middle, when we began to talk about services for individuals with intellectual and/or developmental disabilities, sometimes with the best of intentions, they have designed and wrap those services so tightly around that person that it gets in the way of how they interact with their family or how they interact with the community. So what's really important moving forward is to think about that space and how we can think about it differently so that it doesn't prevent them from being part of their family, their friends, and the things that are around them that they want to be part of. We want to get to that image on the far right where the person receives all the different kinds of supports that they need. And those are represented by those stars, but not just when they need them and where they need them. And that whether they're eligible for paid supports or not, they receive them, right? And so what we're talking about there then is, oops, wait a minute. Sorry. Is that, and what we know about this is that not everybody receives services, right? So we know that 75% of the individuals with disability are living like that image on the left. They don't have that services piece, right, in place. They're living without services. But we also know that there's only 25% of individuals with disabilities are receiving direct service from systems as they move through on the planet. And this to me is really important. We call this the triangle within Charting the Life course. And to me, this is really important because we want to understand why. Why is it that 75% don't and 25% do? And more importantly to me is the how. How is that 75% doing it? And we know that lots of things influence why they're not getting services. It could be they don't know they exist. It could be that there's not enough to go around. It could be that it's not available where they live. But it could be because what we're offering them doesn't fit. But that doesn't mean they shouldn't get support or service. So that's really why we're going after, we're going after 100% of people receiving the supports and services they need, either paid or unpaid, but being able to have that vision and design and support in designing that vision. So that's really what we're trying to do as we move through this conversation. And that's really why Charting the Life course was developed. And when I think about the work that you do, you guys are doing this every day. When you walk side by side with a family member through a crisis or through a planning time or through a transition, whether that's early intervention or later in life, you're doing exactly that. They're saying, I need this. I'm not getting this IEP service that I want, and we really need it. And we're going to go have a school conversation about how or what we can get. But then you're brainstorming with them about what else they can do and how else they can meet that need. And that's exactly what Charting the Life course is talking about, is integrating what we're available through a direct service or what we can get through support or build it within the community. And that's really what the role of this is as we think about it. So as I said before, we talked about that services, sometimes the way they're built, the way they're designed, get in the way, right, of how families interact with, or how individuals interact, or children interact within their family and within their community. The first place that I can share with you, I am a family member of, I'm actually a sibling, an aunt, a sister-in-law, and a mom to individuals with disability. And I can talk about lots of places just in my own life where I see that service, design surface, well-intended, get kind of be designed in a way that it prevented things, right? So for example, in my own life, my sister, who was 10 years my senior, she was the first one born in my family. She was probably one of the last groups of people that were actually institutionalized, and she was institutionalized at a year old. Well, right there, she was removed from the family. And we as systems learned, not a good idea, not what families want, but we still have services that are delivered in a way that aren't necessarily family friendly or designed in a way that families want. I mean, when I think about my daughter, who was what we can refer to technically as twice exceptional, her getting services, it was a barrier because she had ability in spaces. So again, what we designed as a service model that said, these are folks that need and get services, and these are folks that don't, caused that kind of separation because she was separated out of that service model. So I want you to think about that. We're going to put you into groups of 3 people in breakout sessions. And I want you to think about the families that you touch, the families that you're working with, and how do services in any system around developmental disability, in the way that they're designed, create a barrier for your families sometimes, and create and kind of cut them off from the type of relationship they might want with friends in their neighborhood or family members, or activities or things available in their community that everybody else uses. And I want you to just talk about that a little bit in your groups, and you're going to come back and share. You're going to be in groups of 3s. I would love for a person whose last name begins with the earliest in the alphabet to take notes, because I'm going to ask you to come back and share a little bit in the chat box as we transition into the next section. So we're ready to go when you are, Tracy. Language being a barrier from services given in a school, absolutely. Our group shared that they see transition programs as having barriers, especially with availability of service being available at specific times only, absolutely. Let's see, got two. Anybody else got comments? How many groups did we have, Tracy? 5. And I'm going to share with you that part of this is going to be the ongoing conversation as a group. So that chat's going to be instrumental to that piece and what we get out of this training. And really the training is built around your discussions. That's how we customize it to your group. So the more that you are able to share. So if those other 3 groups that haven't shared anything could continue to do that as we move forward, we're going to continue to do breakouts and stuff. And that's really going to be meaningful to the conversation. So language barriers, disconnect between agency, limited transition options in schools. Our group identified the supports assume that the person with the disability is incompetent at the beginning, and they also that they support to often seek to move the location of the child. So yes, so that's a systems decision, right? Simpler for us to have all those children that we've identified as being similar in one space, but then that cuts off me from friendships for kids in my neighborhood and riding the bus with the rest of the kids so that I have a social life afterwards. And when we talk about when we get to high school transition and everybody disappears in my life because we're not coming to that same building, it's because I haven't built those same roots as other kids. And again, when you add that language barrier that was talked about twice, same thing. And so we really have to think about this more holistically as systems and learn from families, but we have to be aware of what we're building and whether or not it really fits. Serving families that are going through a process of immigration, and many of these programs require information as social security numbers that provide a huge limitation to access to services. Exactly. So we want to have a lens of how these tools can address some of those issues, help you manage them better, help you have different conversations about them. That's my hope. And it may be that we'll work with different groups more deeply with these tools, if that makes sense moving forward. But what is Charting a Life Course? Charting a Life Course is about different conversations, pushing those conversations just like you guys had, though very short, and I apologize for that. But the idea that we need to talk about these things, how is what we're designing a barrier? I can share as a USET, we did something and all of a sudden we looked up and we realized the location that we chose for our own reasons, convenience, good lighting, all those things was a barrier to our families. And we're thinking about this all the time and we still ended up hitting that wall. And so thinking about that and bringing that into our thinking and our conversations as we work with each other within the organization. It's a different way of thinking. It's encouraging high expectations. It's integrating lots of different types of supports alongside those services so we can stretch it and make it go further and do more. And it's not just about the tools. The tools are lovely and they make sense for families, but they really, it's the conversation that they encourage that makes a difference. And it's not a program. There's not a place to jump in. Any age, any tool, any conversation we might not have time to sit down and do a full trajectory, but when I talk to a family, I might start with, so talk to me. What is it that you truly want? What would your good day look like? What would a good day in your life look like? And what would it have? And what would you not want? What cannot be there? And those 2 boxes alone are going to be very powerful. I want to just look really quick at this last comment. Families are often excluded because they're believed to be outside the group making decisions and unable to assist in the supports. And that happens a lot. I even think in my own experience as an educational advocate in that IEP conversation, that when we bring it up as a family member, we're expecting a service and we're expecting, hours and we want help. Help me figure out how to make this. If this is what we want, and this is what we want to see as the end game, where can you help? And what might you suggest that I do when outside of those school hours, or who might I connect to, and that kind of stuff. So it goes bigger and beyond just the basic services. But realistically, what I want you to know is that Charting a Life Course is across the life course. That's why it's called Life Course. And it's at any age to jump in at any point. Transition points are places where people and families especially naturally gravitate, because our radar goes up when we're in a transition. We're anticipating change and we're looking for it. And we're looking for those things to help us hold ourselves steady as we make that change and see things before they happen to us. And that's why I think these tools are great at transition. The core belief of Charting a Life Course is that all people and their families have a right to live, love, work, play, and pursue their life aspirations in their community. That goes back to wanting it to be with the people I care about, where I live and where I want to be, and identifying what that is and how that's important. You know, ideally, we know that across the that lifespan of disability, we've been altering and changing it when families say something didn't work. My family said, you know, yes to placing her in an institution because there were two people in the universe that could tell my mother what to do, and that was a doctor and a priest. And both of them were involved in the conversation. Realized that community is involved in that disability conversation from a very young age. But my in-laws, who had a daughter with Down syndrome 7 years later, 8 years later, said, no, she's not going there. We are not doing that. And so again, family voice changed it. And you guys hear that family voice all the time. So you're instrumental to this greater conversation in Ohio. That's very important to me. And that's why I'm so excited to have you involved, so that we need to hear what is and isn't. And Director Davis and the project lead partners in this group want to hear what is working and what isn't working. Because ultimately what that means is we're going to begin that great bigger advocacy work at the undercrux, because we're going to hear that empowered voice and it's going to instrument change. And that's really what you guys do as your mission. You know, you do it in lots of different places, but you know, anything from the IEP table and empowering the voice there to the youth empowerment series that you guys just released, those cartoons, again, a place where we're bringing up the self-advocate to say, this is what I need and this is what I want, and making sure that they have the tools to do that. And then anything that you do where you pushing out any public comment and asking for public comment on rule or things like that, and making sure that we are aware that that's available and an opportunity for us to speak to those things. So it's ingrained in what you do. And we as families want to learn more and be able to be better prepared to hear it and feel empowered to act on it. A lot of times prior to this role, I would see things come out from you guys about commenting on something. And I was like, well, they're not talking to me. But more and more as we're exposed to the work that you do, as you know, we have an opportunity to work with you on IEP goals, and then we learn about those other things, we're then feeling more apt to respond to those things. So the overall family empowerment that you build is really integral to that part of the work, especially here in Ohio. Let's go back and take a breath. That's all the intricate stuff. I want to really focus on the trajectory. And the trajectory basically has two elements. What is it that you want? And it can be a vision of today. It can be a vision of a month. It can be a vision for a year, like an IEP. It could be a vision of transition for over several years. It could be for a lifetime. It really is up to what you are looking for or what a family is looking for. But what is it in that space, in that thing that you're trying to describe or hone in on? What is it that you want? What is, you know, we talk about what does your best day look like? And in crisis, what a gift it is to a family to just stop for a second and go, okay, tell me what your best day would look like. Because then you really know at the core what you're trying to help them address or solve. And then you also want to say, what is it that you don't want? What are you absolutely trying to avoid, right? And we know through this work that all of us who do trauma-informed, you know, we all try to have that trauma-informed lens. That's your trauma right there. When you have a family member talk about a particular situation and you do the want and don't want, your don't want box is your trauma. And sometimes with families, it's more important to talk about and acknowledge what I don't want and help me see the vision for what I want then, because sometimes I can't look past what is happening and I can't talk about my best day. Excuse me, best day is not on my list of things to do today. This is what I want to talk about, and giving them that opportunity and flipping it, say, I really hear you saying that this setting isn't working out because of isolation and cutting you off, and what you really want is an opportunity to connect. Or I hear you say, and making that flip for them and begin to help them see what they might be able to want. But we know as family members that we turned off our ability to vision. When we got that diagnosis, often we're like, oh, so now what can I want? What can I dream about? Right? And so the want and don't want box is so simple, but it is so powerful. And those are the basics of the trajectory. And like I said, you can do a trajectory for trying to get through. I did one with a young lady who was coming out of partial hospitalization, right? And what she wanted. And she's like, I need friends. And we really talked about what does a friend do? What does a friend want? And we broke it down. And that went into her want box. And she wanted somebody check on her and know when she didn't show up, when she said she'd be there and things. What she didn't want is to continue to isolate out of fear or being overwhelmed. And she wanted someone to identify a few people that would reach out and pull her in, right? And identifying that made that happen. That wouldn't happen otherwise. So these are two very powerful boxes. And the trajectory is divided into two things. It's the exploring trajectory and the planning trajectory. I suggest when a family is overwhelmed, you stick to exploring. It's just a conversation, right? And you don't even necessarily have to tell them you're filling out a trajectory. You can take notes on a trajectory. What I heard you say you want, what I heard you say you don't want. You don't have to say, sit down and go, I'm going to fill out this trajectory with you. Families are going to be like, you what? But what I love about it is when you do go back and reflect it in a document to them, it's their paper, right? We go into so many meetings where we ask them a bazillion and one questions and we type it all in and we get it, and it's a form and we give them a copy. But as a family member, that's not my form. That's your form. You do that for your work. But this is about me. I wanted to give you back and help you see, and I want you to think about it and see what I wrote and maybe add to it. So that's just one way to do it. But I want to do this work with you really quickly. I want to utilize the chat box, and I'm going to share a different screen. Oh, no, I'm going to stop sharing, because I did it wrong. I want to share another screen with you where I have pulled a fillable trajectory from the website, and I'll show you that little gem in a little bit, of just the want and don't want box. And I want you guys to talk about your own lives. It's going to be a representation of this group. So it's not going to be one person's trajectory, but I really want you to talk to me about what you want moving forward, just thinking about charting a life course. So what do you want it to be and what do you not want it to be? So when you think about the fact that you said, I'm going to come to this training and I'm going to give it a try, I'm going to take a look at it. I may have seen it before and had an opinion about it, maybe not. But I want you to start typing into the chat box, and Linda's going to read it to me and I'm going to fill it out on the trajectory. But in your space that you are entering into this training, what do you hope or what do you see as your best outcome for today? And what do you not want? And I'm going to type as you type. So I got to have something to type. I know it's Monday and I apologize, but we wanted to make sure it was interactive.
I want to be able to help my family see what the child's future is not limited to other people's assumptions of my ability. I hope to see an overall plan with the transition gates built in as opportunities to reassess along the way.
Do that one a little bit slower for me. An overall plan.
With the transition gates
Okay.
built in as the opportunities to reassess along the way. Learning new ways to guide and support families that I work with. I want this to be a tool that families can use from B post-secondary, a constant for them.
A tool to use, a tool for families to use from
B post-secondary. A constant for them.
I apologize for my typos. I will fix them. Okay.
I want a tool that families feel comfortable with and know they can share their concerns and are being heard and acted upon to realize their wants and needs.
To share their
Concerns and are being heard and acted upon to realize their wants and needs.
Okay.
A tool that families can go back to and reflect on as they go along. I want parents to be able to use this tool to see that their kids can have a good life beyond the DD system. I want a tool that families can apply to feel empowered and comfortable using their voice.
Not gonna let me type any more today. I want to hold on. We'll capture the chat, and I will finish this trajectory as we move forward. But we have a good start here. Now I want you to do the same thing with what you don't want this training to be.
One more thing, you've got that. Another option given to us that isn't functional in our real world. I don't want this training to be overwhelming for parents and then not be used.
Let's do one more, and then I'll add the rest later.
An approach that takes too much time or is confusing.
So just knowing these right now for me, pardon me, changes maybe how I'm going to talk to you the rest of the event. Pardon me. I'm so sorry. So this process can help to change things as we move along. And that's the beauty of a trajectory, is by putting it on paper, it can have more of an impact. I'm going to move through my technology. So thank you for doing that with me. And I will go back and finish that and make sure I share it with even Lisa, who's not here today, but with the rest of you too. So real quick, I'm going to have Tracy, I'm looking at my timing, and we're of course running a little behind, but we have jam-packed so much in here for today. But Tracy's going to share with you a trajectory that she holds near and dear to her heart.
I do. This is my son, Trey. I sat down to do this and he didn't want to be a part of it at first. And then as I was telling him all the great things I was starting to write about him, he decided to come and be part and join me. And we developed this together. When we talked about things he wanted for his future, of course, family, friends, vacations were important to him. He wants to have a wife and kids someday. His video games, he wants money and therefore a job. He loves to eat, as you see with his picture there. He wants cider beer, very specifically. His cat, he loves going to the store, and ding, 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 he wants to work at Walt Disney World, staying safe and healthy. That picture is him at Epcot outside of Germany with a beer and a pretzel, enjoying his life to the fullest, let me tell you. So when we talked about, son, what don't you want? It was poverty. He doesn't want to have no money. He doesn't want to be sick. He doesn't want mama unhappy with him, because everybody knows if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. And he feels that. He didn't want to be isolated or segregated, which were his words, and surprised me. He didn't want to be treated differently or taken advantage of, since that's something that we have always been a little bit fearful of. And the arrows there that represent him heading down and then back up are just that. This path has not always been straight. He has taken detours into things that might lead to poverty or illness or me being upset with him. But he is definitely on the path moving forward.
So Tracy, how old is Trey real quick?
Oh, I'm sorry. He's 24. Well, he'll be 24 in January.
Okay, so we know that in this work, when we have conversations, families naturally around transition, especially adult transition, grab a hold of this. It's like, it's a thing that maybe really could change things. And you know, we hear a lot of times families say they fall off a cliff, or we hear families say that he's sitting on the couch all day. So this really is a way to move out of that. And it's a natural place to see it. When families are uncomfortable or in fear, it's a great tool to grab a hold of. But any transition is worthy of this, even EI and our early intervention. And so when Amy and I began our conversation, we began it around those that transition, in early intervention. And I'll share with you this trajectory of a family, and it wasn't a whole lifetime. It was really down to brass tacks of her morning routine was something that really kept her up at night. You know, we asked that question, what keeps you up at night? She's like, could I just have a regular morning where my whole world isn't turned upside down 30 minutes into it, right? And so she really worked hard to develop those things that would change their morning routine and change how they launched for the day. It's pivotal for families. And so she looked at things about where he can feel success, putting on his own clothes, brushing his teeth, where he saw his own ability, right? He could identify goals or steps for him doing parts of his medical stuff on his own so that he could reach, and his morning routine stuff, I'm sorry, he could reach independence. And we talk a lot about independence. In Charting Life course, we talk about interdependence because none of us are completely independent. And realistically, independence can lead to isolation. When we're independent as family members, we end up tending to cut ourselves off and doing it ourselves. So we want to use that word interdependence, but he wants to have just a clear, positive morning, right? And they developed those ideas of what would make a difference for her. But they also noticed the things they didn't want, that idea of having building my day so that everything is done for me, right? And that was an ongoing theme in all our conversations. They wanted to make sure that we didn't have constant tantrums, so that mom didn't get to work on time, or relying on his siblings. Can you go get his thing? And can you go and can you put his shirt on? Can you, which is something that somebody had mentioned siblings in the chat before. And we do want that does happen in that crux that we start to depending on them a lot. As this family moved out of early intervention and began to transition into school age, you can see that she moved from the exploring trajectory to the planning trajectory. And in doing so, we identify the age and we start looking at something. We start on that right side. She changed her right good life box and her don't want box to be more specific to that particular year. And then she did something by going to the left hand. So we start with those first two boxes on the right and we fill them out. Then we move to the left side and we fill out those top two boxes, the top box and the bottom box there. What we're doing there is we're talking about what in the past have we done well that's helping us move towards what we say is in our good life box on that far right hand side. And equally, what in the past has not helped us get towards what we said, and in fact is leading us closer to what we don't want. Right? So she noted again that growing in his independence, no tears, no fuss, participating in things he likes, both with his peers and in his community, learning and pacing success with his self-care and his medical care, and then being consistent and clear about expectations, right? So those are all things they wanted to work on. They worried about him not having friends, not being included, people, again, always doing everything for him. And with our pace of life, that tends to be when we are the most busy, it's easier for me to do it for him than wait for the time that it takes for him to do it himself, right? And the key is what I love when you find a place to try this with a family, and we always say you should do it with yourself first. So trying and looking at yourself, and we'll do that here, but we'll also encourage you to do that at home. And I'll share some stories about that. But when you do this, there's these little aha moments. And it's not so much about that big trajectory. It's when you ask yourself these questions and you have these conversations, things you realize. So in the conversation with mom, you're going to see two things here. I'm just going to emphasize two. Miss Patty's daycare and then daycare with grandma. All right. When grandma offered to do daycare, she was so tickled. It was safe. It was comfortable. It was a space he knew. It was family, all the reasons we love when we have that opportunity. But at the same time, when we started looking at consistent and clear expectations, not being included, having friends, and people not always doing everything for him. When he was at grandma's, he stayed at grandma's. He was with grandma's. There weren't other peers, and grandma loved doting on him. So that growth that you want to see in independence and meeting expectations, or even knowing that in spaces there are expectations, was really difficult for him. And so as hard as it was when she made switch to traditional daycare, a lot of that growth in those spaces happened. And she was thrilled with it, and she wanted to see it more. So things she identified moving forward that they could do, now that he was in preschool, they could do things like school and community-based therapies. The reason she kept them both is because the expectations in each space were different. The work we were focusing on was different. The level of peers that we were working on, in school, we were working in a small group. In private, we were working one-to-one. All those things added to their goals of what they were trying to make happen. And then really learning by seeing what was happening in different settings. Here she wrote accepting professionals to have low expectations. That was something she didn't want to do. But really, it came down to not accepting anyone having low expectations, and her lens of positivity happening, her stretching that deficit model that we tend to do with people across the whole trajectory of what they can't do. We have to be able to identify that. And families hear that all day, and we tend to work in that deficit model. But she was beginning through these tools to go, we got to talk about what he can do. And we got to start pushing that bar a little bit. So it changed that conversation and empowered her to begin to have that. So that wasn't what she said she wanted when she did this. She wasn't like, can you do a trajectory with me so I can change my expectations and I can empower myself to have that? That wasn't it. And in fact, I don't recall, but I don't think she asked me to do a trajectory with her. It was just a conversation, right? And so we began to build and work with these tools. And we didn't sit down and do the whole planning thing. It was bits and pieces at a time. And it's a document. We always say the IEP is a living document. This too is a living document. I'll say to some of the older kids that I'm working with, when was the last time you took a peek at your trajectory? And she, oh, I haven't. I looked at it with this one young lady that I'm thinking of, and everything in her to-do box or in her want box was done. I was like, look at that. Everything you said you wanted to do, you did, right? And there's a school that's working with it here, and she does the trajectory at the beginning of the semester, and at the end of the semester, she brings them out, puts them in front of them, and she found a kid with his head on the table. And he's like, everything I said I didn't want to do, I'm doing to myself. I'm making decisions that are taking me there. And she's like, that's okay. That's why we do this. Let's revamp it. And she sat with them and did it again. So again, just very powerful. All right, so really quickly, I want to take you and show you the website. I do this correct. Look at me. Yay. Okay. And I want to show you where to find this. So Charting the Life Course, you can find it lifecoursetools.com. And you're going to go into the website. And what I love about this website is it's terribly interacting. You can look at it simply from what perspective you're coming from. Are you a parent? Are you a professional? Are you going to use it in policy change? So you can choose kind of how you enter. I'm going to take you up here to Life Course Library. And I'm just going to take you down to foundational tools. Okay. And these are the basic tools, the trajectory of which is one. And I'm going to show you that you'll have access to videos that share with you how or why you might like to think about using this tool or where, and there's tons of videos. And then it divides it into person-centered tools or family perspective tools. When you're working directly and talking about the child's in the room, and you're using the child's voice and encouraging the child to think about these things, you're going to want to use the person-centered tool. When you're talking to the family and you're saying, what do you want for them? Then you use the family-centered tools, right? When you go into the person-centered tools, we click there. You're going to go in and it'll be a trajectory for an individual. And I just encourage you to use this when the individual's in the room and you're helping to get their voice on paper. But we all have our own trajectories and they impact each other. So having a parent understand their goals along with the schooling and possibly understanding their goals and a child understanding their goals. So each one may be different, but you look for those places of intersection and go, those are the powerful places. That's where we can all work together and move something. And you're going to see both the exploring trajectory and the planning trajectory, okay? And you can then download those here by simply choosing download. And it'll appear on the left-hand side of your screen over here. And then you see it's fillable. And then you're just going to, go over here to download to your computer, to the little arrow here. I will keep in mind, save it to your computer before you begin typing it for changing this, but right now you can lose material. So if you would start typing here and then choose download, it would download blank. So make sure you download first when you do it.
So yeah, I want to answer a question out loud
please.
that Mayor Bailiff says. Do we need to register to use these tools? No, you can just go to the website. Everybody can download. They're all free at all times.
Yes.
And there's a
Let
set
me-
in Spanish for all of them as well.
Let's see where I am. Okay, I've got to think about where my presentation is. Think for a second. Give me a second.
We're going to talk about Trey's planning trajectory next.
Yes. I meant, did we do that? There we go.
There we are. So we're back to me and my guy, Trey. One of the things that he's most interested in doing is having a job at Disney. This is important to him. Just so y'all know, his goal for having a job at Disney is that he can then go to Disney World for free. So he thought on his days off, he could spend all of his time there. He actually has put some work into making this happen. So if you look over all the way to the right, moving to Orlando, having a job at Disney and living on his own. The things he did not want are poverty, isolation, and being taken advantage of when we talk about this. So again, all the way to the left, what of his past life experiences are building towards this goal? Well, he has had 2 years of work experience in this distribution center, so he knows how to work. He went to trade school and received certifications in robotics, electronics, welding, and much, much more. And he has responsibilities at home that prepare him for living on his own. When we think about situations that have led him to the path of what he doesn't want, definitely the anxiety about new situations. He has difficulty making friends without assistance. When he gets stressed out, he tends to panic and he will often make a bad decision. And he also has a very difficult time understanding that bad guys don't wear black clothes and capes and hats and look like villains. He doesn't understand that they may look like your best friend. So when we think about moving forward to get him towards that good life, what do we need to work on? Well, we certainly need to work on money, paying bills, saving, how to budget. We need to work on how do you set up utilities, son? What does that look like? How would you get a lease for an apartment? You need to learn what that's about and how much you can afford. Disney has programs for employees who have developmental disabilities. What do those look like? And will those put you into the jobs that you want to be in? You have to learn more. And then he needs to learn about how to handle emergent situations. If mom and dad are in Ohio, then what? And things that will probably not lead him moving forward to things that he wants or puts him in his don't wants, not reaching out to when he needs help because he often thinks he can handle things on his own until it's too late. Completely trusting people until he gets to know them too well because he is a natural truster. And then letting his anxiety build to the point where he's unable to work. And then all of this effort he's put forth would be for no good. So these are what Trey and I came up with when we started working on these specific issues on his trajectory.
And Tracy, two things come to mind when Tracy shows her trajectory. Number one, this work is always done well together, and it's great when people have an opportunity to share their trajectories, because I'm going to tell you right now, I had no idea that Disney had a program for people with disabilities. And so when we're professionals and we're talking about this work and the things that we can learn from each other and schools can learn. So Trey goes in and uses this as an IEP meeting, and all of a sudden the intervention specialist or the transition coordinator is going, I got 2 other people that are Disney nuts about Disney, because that's a thing no matter where your ability lies. And he's like, oh my gosh, I had no idea they had that. So that putting it on paper and sharing is huge. The other thing that we want to share with you is there is a tool on the website, and because of timing, I'm not going to go there if we have time at the end, but you are going to get it as an attachment, and may have already received that. And that is for the question and answers book. I call it the Big Blue Book. And what that does is it breaks it down by domain, by life stage. So if you're working with a family in early intervention who's just getting started and they don't know where to start, and they're like, what should we be doing? And I avoid the word should in my universe as much as I can, but there's a list of predictable things that we can be thinking about and working on. So Tracy said he has chores. So it talks about what are the family expectations? What are you asking them to do? And it starts getting family on that that mindset of possibility and suggesting it. And it begins in the family, you know, is my family helping me, to am I? And it changes across the lifespan. When you get into transition age, it's like, am I asking questions like this? So it's a great tool, and you'll receive a link to that at the end of our training. But when you don't know where to start with these boxes, you can simply rely on that if you want to. So now our next step is we're going to do another activity.
Celia, just real quick, there's another question in the chat.
Please.
How as family we could involve the services and support that are available, so this does not feel completely as family parents only responsible.
May I
So-
step into that real quick?
Absolutely, I love it. Thank you.
Sure. Since it was our trajectory, let me tell you some of the things that we did. We involved OOD in that instance and said, where can we find training? Because tends to be OOD might want to put our kids like in a grocery store situation or whatnot. Well, this is clearly not where he wanted to be. So we asked them, help us find training in robotics, because he wants to work on those animatronics someday. And then they suggested other things. We worked with our board of DD to help with transportation and to help pay for some of the classes that he needed to get that done. We even were able to ask the board of DD, and we received a grant to help him purchase a car that will help him go to work and get those types of experiences under his belt, that sort of thing. Is that answering your question, Marbella?
Yes,
I got
it
it,
did. Thank
thanks.
you.
Sure.
And then Dee I think has something she can share. So go ahead, Dee.
I think it's also important. I've used it where in various situations where I've had families fill it out, but then the providers fill it out separately so that we could even determine, are they working towards the same trajectory goals, or what are the deficits? This is where it really came out. What are the deficits that they're seeing? Because oftentimes as family members, we don't view through the same lens as someone who's an outside provider. And that was really beneficial to have them do it separately.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Thanks for sharing that, because I think you're absolutely right. And I think sometimes, you know, this is a different example, not necessarily as applicable here, but I think it just tells you the power of these. So when I, again, working with a group of teachers, I had them do homework, and they went home and they did a trajectory, and their partner did a trajectory, spouse, husband, whoever at home, that someone else they lived and shared space with, and they came back and shared stories. It's a simple task. It's, you know, there was a teacher and her husband, and they had a for sale sign in their yard. And after comparing their two trajectories, they took it out. They said, if this is what we really want, selling our house doesn't make sense right now. So again, it really isn't about the tools, and the tools aren't just for folks in the DD world, but it really changes the conversation. When we see where we're similar, when we see where we're different, when I learn something from a provider who sees something different in my child that I don't see yet, or vice versa, the conversations that come from that are dramatically different, and they're richer and they're fuller, and they are more directed towards an outcome or an activity that can have a difference or have an impact. So I think they're really powerful. So we're going to have you guys do this work again. What I'd like you to do, you did receive a trajectory, a fillable trajectory as part of a link in an email this morning. I don't want you to panic if you haven't looked at your email yet. Simply have a piece of paper. We're going to work, and prior to going into our group, I want you to put 3 or 4 things in a good life box and 3 or 4 things in a don't want box when you think about your own health. Okay, we're going to keep something simple that you're willing to share, so I didn't want to go too deep. But your own health, you are going to share this with others, so make them things you're willing to talk about. But 4 things that you really want to see in your future, whether that's a week from now or a month from now or a year from now, and 4 things that you need to avoid. And we're just going to sit here quietly for a couple of minutes, and then we're going to jump into into a breakout session. And I'm going to ask you, I'm watching time, I'm going to ask you to identify one step towards what you can do to move towards that. And you're going to share that in the group. So go ahead. I'm going to give you 2 minutes. I know it's short, but I want to make sure we have time. All right, go ahead and send them into breakout rooms. You're going to be in breakout rooms of 2, and you're just going to try to put something in each of the boxes, but really have one actionable step when we bring you back in. I think we said we're a little behind, so I'm going to say 3 minutes. Sorry. And again, I'm sure you're going to say it wasn't long enough. We are learning, and I think that
We sped through it. We got it.
Got it.
Yay. And I'm sorry to make it rush. And next time, maybe we'll just do fewer activities. I think note to self, I might look at the one for next week, Amy, and not do that every 15-minute criterion that we wanted to meet, and lower them so that we can spend more time. But so the purpose in doing this and having you do it yourself and looking at it is just the way it feels to have it on paper, and recognizing that, the way it feels to talk about it, the things that might change in your muscle memory now that you've said those things that are in your good life box, and you might have identified a next step. I would love it if folks would put some of their next steps. I think we have, what do we have? 8, 9, 10 left on the call, no, 11 left on the call. If 11 of you could put in the chat box what you think your next step is going to be, what's your next baby step that would be in those middle 2 boxes. I would also encourage you before next Monday to do some work on this trajectory and share it with one person so that you know what that feels like. And the words that we always say is, when you share an activity or when you share a trajectory, turn to the person you're sharing with it and go, and how can you help? Because that's really what we encourage families to do with their trajectory. Like, what do I do with it? I said, take it into a room and say, how can you help? It's a different IEP conversation when you walk in with the trajectory and you say, how can you help? It doesn't become about a service or support. It talks about, where am I headed? And what do I want in my life? And how can you help? And that really is what we're called to do in those meetings. So that being said, I want to share and honor our time and hopefully be able to continue with what we have planned. And then if you'll keep blowing up the chat, I would love to go back to that at the end here. So just keep adding things. I see one thing's been added. So I'm hoping to see an 11 up there, because you're all amazingly and wanting to help me with the end of this big bang at the end. So there is dignity in risk. This is important to recognize. Tracy shared that, recognizing, what it is that we don't want and the power in that, or being identified. We know a lot of times that we wear our reputation. If you're a child who has had behavior, how that sticks with a child throughout the years. And we start limiting what they're allowed to even have access to because we see them as a child with behavior. Or Shelley Reynolds shares herself that in her brother's Violet said he was a fire starter, right? And those labels are really hard to get away from. But what if you're a Disney freak? Wouldn't that be a cool one that ends up in the file? And that you all love all things Disney, and all of a sudden your gym teacher and your DSP and all these folks know how much you like Disney. And we're changing how we talk to you and how we motivate you because we know that's important to you. And so all those things can have a real impact. So being aware of that as systems, that when we label, we change people's trajectories, right? We talked a little bit about Charting Life Course having this holistic approach and looking at all facets of a life. And that is what we refer to as the domains. And that's what I talked about being part of the Ohio One ISP, is driving that initial survey and questions that teams will answer and think about. And they're going to answer and think about and look at each domain, right? So we've got daily life and employment. What am I going to do all day? Maybe I'm not a kid that's going to, we have a vision for full employment, at least not right after graduation. What is it that I am going to do that moves me towards what I want? Community living. What is it that I need to do? Do I want to live near mom and dad? Do I want to live with mom and dad? Do mom and dad want me to live with them?